do start with that potential deal on DACA. Democratic Minority Leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi say they have struck a deal with President Trump to protect undocumented immigrants brought to America as children. Sources tell NBC the deal was reached over dinner last night at the White House. Apparently, Chinese food was on the menu. The Democratic leaders told the president they can deliver the votes to pair the existing DREAM Act bill with additional border security, but funding that does not include the Mexican border wall. More specifics have yet to be disclosed. So, in a statement, Schumer and Pelosi said, quote, "We agreed to enshrine the protections of DACA into law quickly and to work out a package of border security, excluding the wall, that's acceptable to both sides." White House Director of Legislative Affairs Mark Short told the Wall Street Journal that the Democrat statement was, quote, "misleading in a lot of ways." White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders tweeted, "While DACA and border security were both discussed, excluding the wall certainly was not agreed to." To which Schumer's spokesman, Matt House, replied, "The president made clear he would continue pushing the wall, just not part of this agreement." Some immigration hardliners who've stuck with the president were outraged by the deal. Republican Congressman Steve King of Iowa tweeted that if the story is correct, quote, "Trump base is blown up, destroyed, irreparable, and disillusioned beyond repair. No promise is credible," end quote. The front page of Breitbart News declared amnesty dawn. Dems declare victory as Trump caves on DACA. White House pushes back softly. Commentator Laura Ingraham, who's been floated for White House jobs in the past, tweeted, "The art of the steal. Let's hope that Pelosi and Schumer misrepresented the DACA deal." So, Joe, as you said, some of the people who supported Donald Trump very strongly not pleased last night that he abandoned one of the pledges he made on the campaign trail, but the White House says we didn't abandon it. We want the wall, just not as part of this deal.
Well, yeah, and John Heilman, even Republicans, even Mark Meadows was saying, no, we don't need funding for the wall in this measure. So their dream of a wall continues.
Yeah.
But it's so funny listening to Steve King acting like Steve King understands what the Trump base is, and Laura Ingraham understands what the Trump base is, and all these other people are making the same mistakes that the mainstream media have made for years. Well, if Trump does this, then his base goes away.
Right.
And now they're the ones doing it, and what they're going to find is the Trump base is about Trump.
Right.
They are going to stay with him come hell or high water. So it's just funny now that now they're the ones that are screeching when, in fact, they should know by now that Donald Trump's base is all about Donald Trump and little else.
Yes, that's certainly true, Joe. And look, but I think the reality here is that both of these sides are essentially saying the same thing about what got discussed last night. But the notion that if you parse it all out, the notion that there's going to be a deal that where the president's still going to pursue the border wall, but outside the context of DACA or a broader border security package, it leaves the wall as an isolated thing. And without any other kind of leverage attached to it, the wall's not going to go anywhere, right? So essentially the president's basically saying, I'm going to do the popular part of this. I'll push in symbolically, rhetorically, I'll continue to talk about the wall, but not that it ever really had any chance of getting funded anyway, but now it's basically he's admitting this is never really going to happen. So that's the fact of it. I agree with you that we don't know what the Trump base is going to think about this. These people who are saying it's going to now irreparably fractured are probably wrong because it is more of a cult of personality. But it is worth noting, if Trump is basically walking away from the wall now, he is walking away from the one thing that he campaigned on from pillar to post. So, what the political impact of that is, don't know. But it's worth noting that this is the moment where he basically said, hey, guys, you know what? I'm throwing in the towel.
But the Trump White House said last night, Harold, they're not walking away from the wall. They're just not doing the wall as part of this deal. And that's always been the case. Again, as I said, Mark Meadows said a couple weeks ago, the Freedom Caucus said several weeks ago, Donald Trump's White House has said for some time, hey, we don't have to have the wall as part of the final deal. So they strike a deal, and it's not going to be part of this final deal in DACA. DACA is something that is overwhelmingly popular with the American people. And so that's the way he's moving forward. And he's doing something that actually is going to be popular with most Americans. I find it hard to believe that his base is going to run away from him on this one because, again, The base is about Donald Trump. The base is not about Steve King or what Steve King's base is about. It is unique to itself, and there are, you know, only 12% of Americans, only 12% of Americans support Steve King and Laura Ingraham and Ann Coulter's position to remove or deport Dreamers. Only 12%. And what is it? 73% of Americans want Dreamers to stay, either as residents who are legalized or as citizens. And they can have the debate over that all they want. But only 1 in 10. Donald Trump last night agreed to a 90-10 proposition, Harold Ford.
Right.
And now he's got all these people screeching at Breitbart. Maybe he can look and go, oh, maybe that's why I've been sitting at 33% instead of 55% all this time. Because I have people that want me to be on the wrong side of a 90-10 issue.
Let me try to add to your points. I think you've described it aptly and correctly. I'd say two additional things. One, we all know when the president's numbers go up, any president, he and one day will be able to say she is able to negotiate on a whole range of things. The president, as this program has noted, because the polls have indicated, has been stuck in the mid to high 30s over the last several weeks for a variety of reasons that have been discussed. This moves the numbers up. This will help to move the numbers up. Two, you're right. His base is likely not to go anywhere because Steve King or even Breitbart says what they may say. We've seen some data in the recent days showing even Democrats, as they have worked hard to try to portray and depict this president as being out of touch with mainstream Americans, their numbers have not gone up generically across the country. And finally, this makes the president 2 for 2. If indeed this deal, the first deal with the Democrats around funding for hurricane relief, and we're now seeing, which I think is the third one he can enjoy, the fact that the president's looking to link tax cuts or some form of tax cuts to this hurricane relief package. It would be a third win for him. So you have hurricane relief and a debt ceiling. You have now DACA. It looks like the beginning of it. And we could find ourselves having a conversation in the next few weeks, which
you know
I think many people thought
Harold?
unthinkable. Legislating, governing is what you call it.
You call it legislating, you call it governing, you also call it momentum.
No doubt about
Nothing
it.
succeeds like success. He's getting things done, and guess what? Memo to Republicans on Capitol Hill, he's getting things done because he's not talking to you.
Right.
Like the Republicans
That's
on
the
Capitol Hill.
real thing here. They're not in the middle of it. It's Democrats that seem to be the core of it, to your point.
They're not, because he's had them in the middle of the White House and the Oval Office for 8 months. I'm not knocking the Republicans on Capitol Hill,
Right.
but if you want to be part of the game, you better get your act together. You better get together in HC5 and go, okay, well, we can never get a majority because everybody's trying to get their own special deal here. Maybe, who knows? Maybe they're trying to get an off-ramp somewhere, Willie. Maybe they're trying to get a government jet to pay for their honeymoon. Who knows what they're after? But they're not doing it the right way. So if you're Donald Trump and you want to get things done by the end of your first year, right now, unfortunately, for Republicans, he can't deal with you. He's got to deal with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer because they have the votes to get it done. And also, they're smart enough, in this case, to be where 90% of Americans are and not where 10% of Americans are.
And Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, he's open to dealing. They may be over for dinner once a week at the White House to try to strike one of these deals. Elise, I want to just read you part of the lead from the Breitbart story about this. President Trump signaled a full-fledged cave on the issue of giving amnesty to nearly 800,000 illegal aliens currently protected by an Obama-created executive immigration program. Does he block out that noise? These are people who supported him, obviously, throughout the campaign, helped make him president. Does he listen to that, or does he move past it?
Well, he's going to be receiving strong pressure from within the administration. Certainly, Jeff Sessions can't be happy about this. Stephen Miller can't be happy about this. But does this president care about what, hardline advisors are telling him, or what the public and getting praise? Does that matter far more to this president? I would say that the praise and the public recognition that he is moving in the direction of what most American wants, I think that probably matters to this president more than anything.
Just want to drop in, Joe, real quick. The president just tweeted, this is from Donald J. Trump. No deal was made last night on DACA, he writes. No deal was made last night on DACA. Massive border security would have to be agreed to in exchange for consent would be subject to vote. So I guess he is hearing some of the noise.
Well, but I mean, that's specifically, Mike Barnacle, again, that's what the White House said last night. Even Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer said, we're going to get DACA in exchange for border security. And so even that is not news. I want to go, though, Mike, again, and maybe they'll put this up on the banner down below. When people in Donald Trump's quote base are talking about how horrible this is for him, I want to underline this fact. Look at the bottom of your screens, my friends. Only 12% of voters support Breitbart's position. Only 12% of voters support Sean Hannity's position. Only 12% of voters support Ann Coulter's position. Only 12% of voters support Laura Ingram's position. Now, that doesn't mean they're wrong. That doesn't mean they're right. But I don't know any politician on the face of the earth, any president, who has been listening to people who have kept him at 32 or 33% that wouldn't go, you know what, I think this is the right thing to do. I promised in the campaign I would take care of these people. And hey, 90% of Americans are on my side. So yeah, I'm fine with the base being pissed off this morning because they can sit and the 12% of them can get in a phone booth somewhere and hug in Washington, D.C.
Well, there you go. I mean, a lot of people, Joe, not only this morning, but yesterday, last night, are really overthinking this whole thing. This isn't about DACA. It's not about Steve King. It's not about Laura Ingraham. It's about Donald J. Trump. He wants a win. He's watched the Cleveland Indians win 21 straight. He likes to be on that side of the aisle. He wants a win, and that's what this is about. He wants the big W on the wall in the Oval Office, and he doesn't care about Schumer, Pelosi, McConnell, nobody. He cares about himself. That's who he is.
And Mike Barnacle, while we're talking about the Cleveland Indians, again, an incredible 21 game, they break the AL record. If you've got two sides of the bench, and on one side of the bench you got a bunch of bums, as Leo DeRocher or somebody might call them, that don't know how to play baseball and have lost 21 games in a row for you, and you got people on the other side of the bench that, well, now have rolled up 2 or 3 wins in a row for you, again, where do you go? This is the Republican Party's own fault. This is Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, the entire Republican Party's own fault, because they're the gang that can't shoot straight. They own Washington, D.C., and they have been the do-nothing Congress because they can't, they don't even need the president. They can pass legislation and put it on his desk. They're incapable of doing that after promising 7 years, put us in power, and these are all the things that we're going to do for you. They can't do anything.
Well, you know, the whole thing gets back to what you were saying, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago. Donald Trump isn't a Republican. He's not a conservative. He's not a Democrat. He's not a liberal. He's Donald Trump. His whole world is himself.
Well, and John Heilman, and I know you wanted to go to Carol Lee, but John Heilman first, before you do, who can blame a president for actually working with people that can get, I will say stuff, I'd like to say something else on TV, that can get stuff done?
No, well, no one can blame a president who will want to get things done. It's kind of amazing, though, that it turns out that in a town where Democrats have control no branch of government, that the people who can get things done are Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. I don't really understand how that could be, but it turns out to be true. Carol Lee, what say you?
Well, to me, the pushback on this kind of tells you, from the White House, tells you everything you need to know. You know, this is not a White House that pulls punches when it wants to knock something down. And you have the press secretary saying, you know, that nothing was agreed to till everything's agreed to, essentially. And Mark Short saying that this is misleading. And so clearly, you know, if they really wanted to knock down the framing that Schumer and Pelosi put on this meeting and what was discussed, they know how to do that. And they're not doing that.
We do start with that potential deal on DACA. Democratic Minority Leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi say they have struck a deal with President Trump to protect undocumented immigrants brought to America as children. Sources tell NBC the deal was reached over dinner last night at the White House. Apparently, Chinese food was on the menu. The Democratic leaders told the president they can deliver the votes to pair the existing DREAM Act bill with additional border security, but funding that does not include the Mexican border wall. More specifics have yet to be disclosed. So, in a statement, let's hope that Pelosi and Schumer misrepresented the DACA deal. So, Joe, as you said, some of the people who supported Donald Trump very strongly, not pleased last night that he abandoned one of the pledges he made on the campaign trail, but the White House says we didn't abandon it. We want the wall, just not as part of this deal.
Well, yeah, and John Heilman, even Republicans, even Mark Meadows was saying, no, we don't need funding for the wall in this measure. So their dream of a wall continues.
Yeah.
But it's so funny listening to
Part of this agreement. Some immigration hardliners who've stuck with the president were outraged by the deal. Republican Congressman Steve King of Iowa tweeted that if the story is correct, quote, Trump base is blown up, destroyed, irreparable, and disillusioned beyond repair. No promise is credible, end quote. The front page of Breitbart News declared amnesty dawn. Dems declare victory as Trump caves on DACA. White House pushes back softly. Commentator Laura Ingraham, who's been floated for White House jobs in the past, tweeted, the art of the steal.
Steve King acting like Steve King understands what the Trump base is, and Laura Ingraham understands what the Trump base is, and all these other people are making the same mistakes that the mainstream media have made for years. Well, if Trump does this, then his base goes away.
Right.
And now they're the ones doing it, and what they're going to find is the Trump base is about Trump.
Right.
They are going to stay with him come hell or high water. So it's just funny now that now they're the ones that are.
Pelosi said, quote, we agreed to enshrine the protections of DACA into law quickly and to work out a package of border security, excluding the wall, that's acceptable to both sides. White House Director of Legislative Affairs Mark Short told the Wall Street Journal that the Democrats' statement was, quote, misleading in a lot of ways. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders tweeted, while DACA and border security were both discussed, excluding the wall certainly was not agreed to. To which Schumer spokesman Matt House replied, the president made clear he would continue pushing the wall, just not